My name's May. I love yarn. I love to knit and crochet. Those are my hobbies. And I also happen to have been born visually impaired, legally blind, completely colorblind. And so I knit and crochet by feel. And today, what we're looking at is a blanket that I have knit and designed. It is in a stitch pattern what a lot of people refer to as old shale or feather and fan. Now, most of you probably seen a knit blanket in feather and fan. It's a common stitch pattern that's been around for who knows, probably hundreds of years, right? Well, most people work feather and fan over 4 rows. This blanket has been worked over 6 rows, and I really like that work better. It really sort of elongates the stitch pattern. It really opens up that lace work. It gives it, I think, more texture. I just like the look and the feel of it. We got a little ridge here going on, and I like the look of that a lot better. Now, of course, you can work, there's so many variations of feather and fan out there. I've seen it worked over 11 stitches. I've seen it worked over 17 stitches. I've seen it worked over 18 stitches. In this particular pattern, I'm going to work feather and fan over a 17 stitch repeat. Okay, so that's what you need to work. So I think in this pattern, I think in this particular blanket, we work it as a 17 stitch repeat 7 times. So that is 100 and I believe 19 stitches. Okay, and this particular blanket is worked in a yarn called Snuggle Puff. It was by knitpicks and we crochet. Unfortunately, right, that's a discontinued yarn. If you're a returning viewer to my channel, you know my favorite yarns get discontinued. So we have to find another yarn to work this in. And by the way, if you are colorblind, the color of this is called Piglet. It's a really nice pale pink. It's so pretty. Now the nice thing about blankets, whether you're knitting and crochet, now of course I'm sure that there's a few exceptions to the rules, right? But for the most part, blankets like this are yarn inclusive, meaning you can use whatever yarn that you want and then use your hook or your needle according to how much drape that you want. Now this yarn was, I would classify as a heavy worsted, a heavy number 4 on the edge of being a bulky, but it was a very fine, very airy cotton nylon blend. I just loved it. It was a unique yarn. So I did this on a US size 8 or 5 millimeter needle. If I was going to work this up on a DK weight yarn, which you absolutely could, you would want probably to use a size 6 needle. If you're going to do it on a sport weight, you'd probably want to use a 4, depending on how much drape and openness you want. On a number 4, it does create kind of large holes in the feather and fan. I can certainly get my fingers through there. They don't get stuck. I like it. I kind of like having something you can kind of grip onto. And I think a lot of children do, but of course that varies, right? People vary. So some people might not want the holes in their blanket this big. And if you don't, then I would recommend you do yours in a DK weight yarn, okay? But for the purposes of this video, we are going to do ours in Brava 500. It's a worsted weight yarn by knitpicks and we crochet. I'm going to use that just because, you know, I think the worsted weight's going to make it a lot easier for people to see it. It's, you know, it's 100% acrylic. It's versatile. I think most people can access some kind of, you know, 100% for worsted weight yarn. And of course, you don't have to use this yarn. You can substitute it with another worsted weight, a Red Heart, a Karen Simply Soft, a DK weight, maybe like a Barocco Vintage DK or the Cascade Cherub DK. Those are blends of like nylon and acrylic. Also machine washable yarns, which are great for blankets, okay? So The first thing we need to talk about is what skills do you need to make this blanket? This is not a from the beginning tutorial, meaning I'm not going to teach you how to cast on or bind off in this video, okay? So the skills that you need to make this blanket are you need to know how to cast on in some way, right? I don't care which way you use. You use whatever works for you. I'm not here to tell you the best cast on method. I am going to use the long tail cast on because that's what works best for me. And I will tell you something, as somebody who tends to cast on, knit, and bind off too tightly, you'll hear that me talk about that in my videos often. I'm trying to find the end of my yarn. One thing that I do to help with that is I'm going to be knitting on one large circular needle as a 47-inch cable. I've got two knitting needles here in size 8, and they're on a large circular. So you're going to need a needle to accommodate a blanket size project. And again, you can do yours on whatever kind of needle that you want, okay? But I have a 47-inch cable here. So, but one thing that I do to help myself, because I do tend to cast on too tight, is I am going to hold my needles parallel. I put the two tips together and I fold that cable in half. So I basically will be doubling my needles when I do my cast on, okay? So that when I do my long tail cast on, I'm going to be casting on over both needles, and that's going to give me a lot more stretch and a lot more room in my cast on. So that's just a tip if you tend to cast on it too tight. So you're going to need to know how to cast on in some way. You're going to need to know how to bind off your project in some way. You will need to know how to knit, right? How to purl, how to knit two together, and how to yarn over. And that's it. Those are the only knitting skills that you need to make this beautiful blanket. That's it. So, to me, it's a pretty, it's a pretty easy project in my opinion. But of course, if you're brand new to knitting, right, and you're still struggling to knitting, that might seem like a lot. But I think it's a great, beginner lace blanket project. It's deceptively easy in my opinion. And I think you can do it. I do. So, so I use a multiple of 17. So that's 119, and you can do any multiple of 17. Like if you wanted to make yours on a sport weight yarn, right? A real delicate yarn with the much finer holes, you could do that as a multiple of 10 and do 170, okay? Now, also on mine, because we know stockinette doesn't always lay very flat, I put a border on my blanket. So at the bottom, I have 4 rows of garter stitch, and I have 4 rows, actually I think that was the top where I did my bind off. This is the bottom, not that it really matters, it really doesn't matter, but this is where I cast on, and I have 4 rows of garter stitch at the bottom, and I have 4 rows of garter stitch at the top for my border. Now you don't have to do that. And then on each side, I also did 3 stitches in garter stitch to help that really lay flat and give it a nice border. So I added a +6 to my pattern, right? So 7 pattern repeats of 17 gave me 119 plus 1, 2, 3 garter stitches on that side, plus 1, 2, 3, so +6. So to make this on a worsted weight yarn on an 8, I cast on 125 stitches. So that's what I'm going to do. So you use whatever multiple of 17 you want, and then you add on however many stitches you want on your border, right? Just probably want to make it symmetrical. So if you want to do 5 or 4, right? If you wanted to do 5 on each side, then, you would want to do 10 total extra to your 17, so you'd want to do 129. Okay, So that's the multiple. And then if you want to, like if you were doing this in a sport or a DK weight yarn, you might want more than 4 rows of garter stitch. You might want 6, okay? That's entirely up to you and what yarn that you choose to use. That's the beauty of this blanket. That's the beauty of this stitch pattern, okay? So I am going to go ahead and take my little label. This is the color Blush. It's a nice light pink. And I'm going to go ahead and pull enough yarn. Hopefully that's the one, negative to the long tail cast on for me at least, is you do kind of have to guess, about how much yarn, right, you're going to need. And sometimes my tail ends up way too long. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and get started here, right? Holding my needles parallel and in my right hand. And then I'm going to loop, right? Got my yarn looped over my thumb there. And that's just how I do the long tail cast on. I stick both needles in there and then both needles in that second loop, right? And up and over. And there I got my first 2 stitches on my needles. So I'm going to go ahead and cast on 125 stitches and then I'll be back. Okay, and the other thing I forgot to mention, when you're gathering your yarn and your appropriate needle size, we're also going to need some scissors at the end, right, to cut our yarn. And we're going to need a tapestry needle, some type, to weave in our ends. Now, of course, the beauty of using this big Brava 500 skein, it's over 1,000 yards. So we should be able to get a baby blanket done with 1,000 yards and have no extra ends to weave in, which I'm loving because I'm not a big fan of weaving in ends, okay? So I'm looking forward to that. So some kind of needle, something like this one with the big old blunt, blunt end there, and some scissors. And then I use, because we're doing lace and we've got our little pattern repeat here that we're going to do 7 times, I like to use stitch markers to divide up those lace patterns. Now I am going to put in these 3 garter stitches at the edge, and I'm actually going to use a marker there as well. If you don't want to do that, if you're like, I don't need that, that's fine. I do. I knit and crochet by feel, and that marker just says to me, okay, you've done your garter stitch border, now you start your 17, and that way I know that I'm going to have 17 stitches between each pattern repeat and then at the end. So I'm going to use 8 markers total. I'm going to do 3, and then I'm going to put in a marker. And as somebody who's visually impaired, I am going to also use different shaped markers. So after my 3 garter stitches, I'm going to use this little heart-shaped marker. That's a different feel. And then I'm going to work, so I'm going to work my 3. I'm going to put in that heart-shaped marker. Then I'm going to work my 17. And then I'm going to put in one of these round markers, okay? And then we're going to work 17. And we're going to put in another round marker, and I'm going to do that all the way across the blanket until I get to the last. So that's going to be 6 markers in between my 7 pattern repeats, right? I'm going to have 6 markers. And then when I get to the end, I'm going to go ahead and put in probably like another heart or triangle or some kind of different shape, just to say to myself, hey, you're at the end of your pattern. And then I'll slip that marker and just work those last 3 and garter stitch. Okay, now of course you don't have to use stitch markers, but for me, especially as somebody who works by feel and likes to work patterns and things while I'm listening to audiobooks and podcasts and different things, it just helps me to just cruise along and work by feel and not have to worry about what's happening or how to see my work or what's going on. And as I've talked about before with this pattern, this, in my opinion, it's a 6-row repeat, okay? But it's a great pattern for doing while you're watching TV or while you're hanging out with people, when you're just chatting and visiting, because really, out of our 6 rows, there's only going to be 1 lace row, okay? We're going to work a knit row, a purl row, our lace row, a purl row, a couple of knit rows to create our ridge. That's all we're going to do. So there's only one lace row where you really have to count your stitches, do that knit two together, do that yarn over, and keep track of what you're doing, okay? So that's one of the reasons why I love working this blanket. Besides, it's just a beautiful pattern. It makes a great, in my opinion, it's just a beautiful baby blanket to gift to people. Now, of course, if you just want to make like a little, car seat blanket or a stroller blanket or something, you could do like 4 pattern repeats. You could just make it like 2.5 feet, or something like that. And of course, you can make this blanket like a king size. Okay, we could do that. We could sit here and knit this thing up in a king size blanket. We could do like 10 or 12 pattern repeats and just go on and work for a month together and make ourselves a beautiful blanket in any size that we want. It's just a multiple of 17 plus whatever garter edge you want to put on your blanket. Okay, so I got my cast on here, and of course, as I said, I always end up with a tail that's way too long, right? That's me. So what I just have to make sure is that I don't end up working with my tail accidentally, right? That's what I don't want to do. So I'm going to make sure that I got this big long tail behind me. I'm going to go ahead and zoom this in for you all a little bit more. Make sure that I'm not twisting my stitches here. That's another thing you want to make sure you're doing when you're working on a big long cable. And I'm going to go ahead and start my garter stitch. I'm not going to work all 125 stitches with you in garter stitch, but how to work a garter stitch edge if you're not familiar with it, if you're very brand new to knitting, okay, is you just knit every single stitch, okay? So you go into that stitch with the right tip, with the right needle, your working needle, you go into that stitch front to back, okay? You yarn over the needle, you pull it up, you put that new stitch on the right hand needle, and you push the old one off the left into the stitch front to back, yarn over, new stitch on the right hand needle, okay? That's all that we're going to do to create garter stitch. So this is row 1 of our garter stitch border on our blanket. Knit every single stitch. That's it. And like I said, I'm going to do 4 rows of garter stitch. You do however many you want. Okay, it's your blanket. You do you. Alrighty, well, I'm going to put the camera on pause. You stitch, I'll stitch, and I'll be right back. Okay, I have finished row 1 of my garter stitch border. And one thing I want to caution you is if you're looking at your blanket and thinking like, that seems a little bit long, just a sort of cautionary, any kind of ripple stitch blanket, whether it's knit or crochet, those ripples are going to pull the blanket in a little bit. So you're going to lose a few inches on each side. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at your initial cast on in any kind of ripple stitch. Okay, now we are working flat. We are not working in the round. And so, working in the round and working flat are different. But to create garter stitch flat, right? Working flat in rows, you just simply flip your project over, right? That's what I'm doing. I just have this long 47-inch cable, so I didn't want to bump the camera and do it under the camera. But I want to make sure I don't lose my stitches off the end here and make sure they're not twisted. Okay, so row 2 of my garter stitch border, we're creating garter stitch in rows, is we simply do the same thing. We're going to knit every single stitch. We're going to go into that stitch front to back and create that new stitch on our right hand needle. Okay, so row 2 of garter stitch border, knit every single stitch all the way across. And then because I'm going to do 4 rows of garter stitch, we're just going to repeat this row, okay? This row 1 and 2, we're going to repeat it one more time for row 3 and 4. And like I said, if you're doing more, then by all means, if you're doing 6 on a sport weight, then you repeat it 2 more times. So however many rows of a garter stitch border that you want, you work it. Okay, I will get back with you. And if you notice, I have not put my stitch markers in yet, simply because, you know, the knitting in garter stitch is going to go faster without having to slide those markers over. So I will place my stitch markers on row 1 of my pattern when we get into that after the 4 rows of garter stitch. But of course, you do you. Okay, I'll see you after we've completed 4 rows of garter stitch and we're ready to begin the 6 row repeat. Okay, I have now knit 4 rows of garter stitch border edging on my blanket. So we are going to start counting our 6 row repeat for our blanket. Row number 1 is just knit. That's it. Row number 1, we are going to knit every single stitch of the row. Nothing fancy at all. Okay, but that's row 1 of your repeat. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to go ahead and place my stitch markers. So, and I am using a 3-stitch border of garter stitch on my edge. So I'm going to knit 1 into the stitch, front to back, yarn over, knit 2 into the stitch, front to back, yarn over, and knit 3. And I am going to go ahead and use different shape stitch markers on my garter stitch edge just to tell me by feel easily. That's my edge, okay? So 1 stitch placed, and now I'm going to knit 17. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and I'm going to proceed until I get to 17. Okay, so I have my 3 edge stitches, I have a stitch marker, and then I should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And now I'm going to place a round stitch marker. And then I'm going to repeat this all the way across, okay? I'm going to knit 17, place a round stitch marker, knit 17, place a round stitch marker until I get to my last 3 stitches. So you continue with that across your blanket for however many 17 stitch pattern repeats you're working. And I'll see you at towards the end of row 1. Okay, so I have 3 stitches left, so I am going to go ahead and use another triangle shaped marker just to indicate this is my edging. This is my garter stitch edge, and I'm going to knit these last 3 stitches, and that's the end of row 1. And we can now flip our project over and make sure that it's straight right all the way across. We don't want to twist our project. And then we are going to start row 2 of our pattern repeat because we are maintaining 3 stitches in garter stitch on the edge. I'm going to knit the first 3 stitches. Knit 1, knit 2, and knit 3. And then we will bring our yarn to the front of our project. We will slip our marker, and now we will begin purling. So row 2, now after you do your garter stitch border, however many stitches that is, you purl all the way across your pattern. That's it. You maintain your garter stitch border. For me, it's 3. And then everything else is purl, okay? So for me, I'm going to purl across until I get to the very edge, right, until I get back all the way across all these stitches, across all these markers. I'm going to purl every stitch until I get back to my end where I have my triangle marker, and then I'm going to knit those last 3 stitches. So that's row 2 of the pattern, is knit your border in garter stitch for however many stitches, and then purl all the way across until you get to your garter stitch edging, and then you knit those last 3 stitches. Okay, see you at the end. Okay, I am coming up to the end of row 2 where I purled all the way across. So I bring my yarn to the back, slip that last triangle marker, and then I knit my last 3 stitches just to maintain that garter stitch border. Okay, so that was it. That is what your that's what your row 2 should look like before you turn your work. And now that's what we're going to do. We're going to turn our work and we are going to start row 3. Now row 3 is the only lace row of the 6 rows. Okay, that's the only one that you got to count and pay attention and focus on. The rest of this, pretty mindless knitting. So row 3, let's go. We are going to maintain our garter stitch border, meaning we are going to knit 1 and knit 2 and knit 3. And here we go. Row number 3, slip our triangle marker. And now we are going to start by doing knit 2 together 3 times. So we got our first stitch, we got our second stitch, 2 stitches, stick the needle just like you're knitting a regular stitch, right? You stick your needle, except you got 2 stitches together. This is a knit 2 together. Stick your needle in both of those stitches, front to back, wrap them together, and this is a decrease. 2 stitches have become 1. So essentially a knit 2 together is a decrease. We are taking out 1 stitch. We're going to do that again. We're going to knit 2 together. So we need to get 2 stitches on our right hand needle under 2 stitches. We're going to yarn over and we're going to take 2 stitches and decrease them to 1. We've reduced 2 stitches. We're going to do that one more time. Take our right tip of our needle, go into those 2 stitches, and we're going to knit 2 together. Okay, so we have now decreased by 3 stitches. So now the next part of our pattern is going to be yarn overs, because we need to add, we want to maintain 17 stitches between each set of stitch markers. So we need to add stitches back in. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do a yarn over knit 1 5 times. Okay, so yarn over, knit 1, and then we're going to yarn over, and we're going to knit 2, and we're going to yarn over, and we're going to knit 3, and we're going to yarn over, and we're going to knit 4, and we're going to yarn over, and we're going to knit 5. And now we are going to add in 1 more. We've added in 5 stitches. We've taken out 3. We are going to add in 1 more yarn over at the end of our repeat there. So that's going to be 6 yarn overs. We're going to increase by 6 stitches. So now we want to mirror our decrease, meaning we want to take out 3 more to keep this nice and symmetrical. So we're going to stick our right tip of our needle into those 2 stitches. We're going to knit 2 together. That's a decrease. We've taken out a 4th stitch in this pattern repeat. We're going to do that again. Right tip, needle tip goes into 2 stitches, yarn over, pull up that, another decrease. Here we are, we've got 2 stitches left before our stitch marker. That's exactly what we should have. Stick the tip of our right needle into those stitches, yarn over. Oh, okay, let me do that again. Yarn over and work our decrease. Okay, and now I'm at my stitch marker. So what we can see here that we have between our stitch markers is a knit 2 together. We've taken out 1, knit 2 together, we've taken out 2, knit 2 together, we've taken out 3, and now we start our yarn over. So we adding in 1, and we're going to knit 1, we're adding in 2, we got to knit 2, we're adding in 3 with the yarn over, we knit 3, we're doing another yarn over for 4, another knit stitch, another yarn over for 5, another knit stitch, a yarn over for 6, and then we've got 3 more stitches to take out. We've got 3 knit 2 together, and that's the end of the pattern repeat. You slip your marker and you start it all over again. So you work a knit 2 together for 1 decrease. You do another, let's see, get my needle tip in between both of those stitches. We're going to do another knit 2 together to decrease by 2. We will do another knit 2 together to decrease by 3. And now we start our adding stitches back in. Yarn over, knit 1. Yarn over, knit 2, yarn over, knit 3, yarn over, knit 4, yarn over, knit 5. So you do that yarn over, knit 1 5 times, and then we got to add in 1 more increase because we're going to take out and decrease by 3 more to keep our pattern symmetrical on each side. So we got 3 knit 2 together, we got a yarn over, knit 1 5 times, yarn over, that's our 6th increase, and now we do another knit 2 together. Okay, we're going to do another knit 2 together, and then we're going to end this pattern repeat with another knit 2 together, and that takes us to our stitch marker. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and work that pattern repeat all the way across row 3. That's your lace row. Okay, so this is the end of row number 3. This is what your blanket should start to look like. You got your little lace in there, and you should be able to count between each stitch marker and make sure that you have 17 stitches. Okay, so we are going to begin row number 4 of our blanket. Okay, so I'm just turning mine over, making sure I got mine untwisted. So row 4 is row 2. That's all we're going to do for row 4 is repeat row number 2. So we knit 1 for our garter stitch edging, we knit 2 for our garter stitch edging, we knit 3 for our garter stitch edging, and then we bring our yarn to the front, slip our little triangle marker, and then we start purling, right? That's it. Stick that right tip into that needle, wrap the yarn, and purl the stitch. Okay, that's all that you do for row number 4 is you repeat row number 2. This time we're just purling into those yarn overs and those knit 2 together from the previous row. Okay, so row number 4 is knit your garter stitch border, however many that is. For me it's 3, and then you purl all the way across until you get to your final marker, and then you will bring your yarn to the back and you will knit those last, for me, 3 stitches to maintain my garter stitch border. Okay, I'll see you at row 5. Okay, I am coming up to the end of row number 4. I have purled across. I'm going to slip my last triangle marker, and I'm going to knit these last 3 stitches just to maintain my garter stitch edging. Okay, so that's the end of row number 4. It's just a repeat of row number 2. This is what your project should look like. You should still have 17 stitches between every single marker. Okay, so that was row 4. It was a repeat of row 2. It was knit your garter stitch edging for 3 for me, and then purl across to your neck to your last 3 or your garter stitch border. Now we're going to start row number 5. And row number 5 of our blanket is knit every single stitch all the way across. Okay, we're knitting our garter stitch edging here. I'm slipping my garter stitch, I'm slipping that little triangle marker for my border, and now I'm just going to keep knitting across. Okay, that's it. We're just knitting across our blanket. So row 5, I gotta make sure I don't get my tail in there. My tail's so long. Row 5, knit every single stitch all the way across the blanket. Okay? All right. So I will see you at row number 6. But this is what your blanket should start to look like. You should start to be able to see your little lace, right? As you work on row number 5, you should start to be able to see and to feel your little lace eyelets there. From row number 3, that's always exciting. You can start to see the shape of your blanket just a little bit as you work across. We're almost to the end of our first pattern repeat. I'll get you there so you can stretch that out and see that just a little bit. So this is our first pattern repeat. I flipped that first marker. Okay, so this is what you can start to see your lace taking form. You could start to see the curve at the edging. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and continue that all the way across for row number 5. Okay, that concludes row number 5. You can really start to see your lace taking shape, right? So we worked rows number 1 through 4 in a laced in stockinette, and this is the blanket that we're making here. Let's see, I gotta get it turned over. Okay, this is the blanket that we're making. So okay, so what we are doing now is we are creating the garter stitch ridge. Excuse me. So what we're doing now, we've got this little tactile ridge within our blanket in garter stitch. So what we're going to do for row number 6, and this is the final row of the blanket, is we are going to once again knit every single stitch. Okay, that's it. So row number 1, row number 5, and row number 6, so half your pattern is just knit every single stitch. Okay, we're going to knit our 3 garter stitch rows or stitches there on the edge, on the border, and then we're just going to go straight across. And so I know you're looking at it, and if you know something about knitting, you're thinking that should be a purl row. Nope, it's not. We're going to make that little ridge. We're creating our garter stitch ridge. So row number 6 is a knit row. We're creating a garter stitch ridge within our pattern, just to add a little more texture, just to add a little more interest. Okay, so row number 6 is a repeat of row number 1, and it's a repeat of row number 5. Knit every single stitch all the way across. Okay, I will see you at the end of row 6. Okay. Okay, so we are now at the end of row number 6 on the wrong side. We're going to flip this blanket over, and this is what it should look like with your first full pattern repeat. You've got your lace, you've got your in stockinette, and then you've got your little garter stitch ridge for texture, and that concludes your 6 rows. That is it. That's all there is to it. Okay, so row number 1, you knit. That's it. Row number 2, you knit your first 3 stitches for your garter stitch border, and then you purl all the way across. Row 3 is the only row that's laced, the only one you got to focus and concentrate on, which is knit your garter stitch edge, and then you knit 2 together 3 times, then you yarn over, knit 1 5 times, and then you need to yarn over 1 more time so that you should be able to count and feel 6 little eyelets, 6 little yarn overs in there, and then we do 3 more, knit 2 together for the decrease, and we repeat that all the way across until we get to our garter stitch edge, and we knit that. Row number 4, a repeat of row number 2. Knit your garter stitch edging, purl all the way across. Row number 5 and row number 6 are just knit. That's it. So in my opinion, this is a pretty simple pattern. It's a TV watching pattern. It's a conversating pattern. The only row you got to focus on is row number 3 to maintain your lace. Okay, and then you make your blanket. This is mine. You make your blanket as long as you want it. You can make this thing as big and as long as you want, okay? So this is the pink one, the other pink one that we already have done. This is mine. And I just knit and knit and knit until I got to how long I wanted it. And then I just did my bind off. You bind off in any way that you like. I did 4 more rows. I did my pattern repeats. And then I did 4 more rows. Actually, I think I have it upside down. I can never tell. I'm going to be honest with you. I can never tell with this blanket when I have it upside down, when I don't. And then you do 4 more rows of garter stitch, or however many you want, okay? Because I did 4 rows of garter stitch on the bottom, I'm going to do 4 rows of garter stitch on the top. But you do you. You want to do 6, you do 6, whatever. And then you bind off and you have yourself a beautiful lacy blanket. It's great for baby blankets. It's great for gifts. It's great for lap blankets. And of course, hey, if you want to make a king size, you go right ahead. I just might do it one of these days because it's such a fun, easy, mindless pattern. Okay, that concludes your tutorial. And just, I was looking at mine, and for some people, you might think that the 7 pattern repeats is just a little bit big for a baby blanket. I personally don't, but if you wanted to make yours a little bit smaller, you could certainly do 6 pattern repeats. That would give you 102 stitches plus your garter stitch edging. So for me, that's 6, so that'd be 108. But you work that out, whatever you want. A multiple of 17, and then take your garter stitch edging, right? However many you want, 3, multiply that by 2, add that on, and you will have a beautiful little feather and fan. I think we call it, I don't know what we call it. I don't know if this is called elongated feather and fan. I don't know if it's called gentle, like a rolling feather and fan, because it's not quite as sharp and pointed as a traditional feather and fan. I don't know what it's called, but I think it's beautiful. Okay, well, happy stitching. You enjoy. Say hello in the comment section. Let me know. Did you make the blanket? Okay, did you make it? Could you follow the tutorial? What yarn did you use? How big did you make it? Okay, are you gifting it? Are you keeping it? Let me know. Let me know all the things, all the details. I hope you enjoyed it. And, I personally think that this is such a beautiful lace pattern. I think it's great in just solids like this, solids, pinks, whites, purples, whatever. But of course, if you wanted to do it in like an ombre or other patterning yarn, you know what? Have fun with it. Okay, well, until next time, happy stitching and bye-bye for now.